Hello and welcome back to the Art of Parenting. This is your host, Jeanne-Marie Pennell, and today I am with Alexandra Roxo, and we're going to talk all about sensuality and our heart and our feelings. And so I'm just very happy to have you on the show, Alexandra. Thank you for making the time and welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, so I always like to get started by asking my guests what is their definition of the art of parenting?
So anytime that I see the word art with anything, it gives me almost like a breath in my body because art is something, that is defined by the viewer, the participator, the spectator, the receiver, and also the artist. And so, the good thing about art for all the parents listening is that art is subjective.
Mm.
Art is not a left brain critical thinking process. Now, people can get very critical and analytical about art, but art itself is something that is felt, it is very personal. And so, to put the word art with parenting, you can immediately see this juxtaposition, perhaps, of something that you may have thought conceptually was very clear rules, philosophies, like this is right, this is wrong, right? Like this is how you do parenting, and this is how you don't, and this is how you're supposed to. But when you put the word art with it, you're immediately allowed to let parenting be something that is experiential, that is personal, that is subjective, and that is going to be amorphous thing, right? Like if you come to a piece of art as a woman who's 85 and is from Croatia, or as somebody who's an 8-year-old who grew up in Texas, you're going to have a completely different experience of that art. And that's parenting, I think, as well. Everybody's experience of parenting is going to be so different because we're all so different. When I hear the art of parenting, I'm just like, yeah, parenting, let it be an art. Let it be wild, messy, conceptual, abstract, whatever I want it to be.
Yes, the list. Yes,
Surreal. Yeah,
everything.
I love that.
It's creative. Thank you for that. Yes, it's so true. And before we get started, Alexandra, I'd love for you to introduce yourselves to our listeners, our viewers, and a little bit about the work that you've been doing.
Yeah. Um, so I am an author and a coach, and I work primarily with women and couples. My journey started entering into the healing arts and my feminine spiritual path. It started with me. It started with my own process, healing through different traumas and wanting to explore my relationship to the divine feminine. And so over time, I moved from being a filmmaker, a director, and an actor participating in the Hollywood world to making a beautiful journey into the healing world and into a place that could be defined as wellness, spirituality. My work now lands pretty much in the relational field. I work with a lot of women in the space of intimacy with themselves, their bodies, their sexuality, their sensuality, and their spirituality, and also in relationship and what that may mean, dating, married, etc. So I work with women one-on-one as a coach, and I also work in groups and I lead retreats. And I've written 2 books. Fuck Like a Goddess is my first book. So the subheader is Heal Yourself, Reclaim Your Voice, and Stand in Your Power. It was released in 2020. It was released right on the heels of Me Too. It was released right at the beginning of COVID, and it has lived such a great life. It's been out in the world for over 4 years, and it's still being passed around. Women from women in India will tag me, to women who are reading it with their moms, book groups. It's really a book about empowering women to find the divine feminine within, to face our shadows, wounds, and discomfort, and let it be an art. Let it be something that is not daunting or over
Mhm.
psychologized or therapized, but something that is a part of our life's journey of art and soul making. And then my second book, Dare to Feel, The Transformational Path of the Heart, is a collection of stories, rituals, and poems. It is more, I would say, artistic, whereas my first book is written a bit more in a coaching, straightforward way. The second book is more artistic. It's experiential. It's inviting you into a feeling. And I look at it as doing the work around the heart, doing the work to soften emotion, to get comfortable in the emotional mess, and to call forth a full spectrum of our emotionality as humans, which is essential to intimacy and lovemaking. And
Mm.
so, yeah, those two books are out there in the world living their lives. And I'm also a new mom. Most of my reality right now is about momming my
Yes.
1-year-old.
Right, right. And that's one of the, topics that I wanted to address, since this is a parenting show, and our intimacy, our sensuality, sexuality, and all that is so important in our parenting journey. I think most of the time that's how we became parents. But I know that for a lot that be a little bit more difficult to pay attention to, or to focus on our own needs when we become a mother. We were talking offline, you're kind of in the throes of it. You have a 1-year-old, so that first, those first few months of being a new parent, a new mother. Do you work with new moms, and kind of helping women in this, relationship world once they've had their children, which can take, I think, a lot from us, right? Because we're so focused on the survival of this little one, where we're exhausted, where we've got a hormone cocktail going on, all of that. So how do you coach women to navigate this new world?
So, first, I just want to presence that I'm still in it and I'm still learning. That being said, I've worked with many moms before
Okay.
becoming a mom. So, I've gotten to know a lot of moms and their journeys. I've heard a lot of stories. I've experienced working with moms who had no relationship to their, or not no relationship, perhaps had not much space, we'll call it, in their lives for their sensuality or erotic life pre becoming a mom. So that's one reality. And I've also
Okay.
worked with moms who maybe did have a relationship to their erotic life as a woman, but then once they gave birth, they abandoned it. They didn't have time for it. They're like, it's a privilege, a luxury. And I've been on the journey to helping them reclaim it. So there's like the reclamation moms, and then there's the moms that are discovering for the first time because they didn't have that relationship with their sensuality or erotic life prior to birth. And now they're like, whoa, wait, I actually want that, whether they're partnered or not. I mean, most moms, I suppose, right after birth, hopefully are partnered, but not everybody, I guess. And so those are two different places, I would say, that I've met a lot of women in. I have had a lot of women who I would say are in the discovery path. Actually, a lot of both. The women who are discovering, they have maybe lived a lot of their life in a more doing space. You could call it, if you wanted to use archetypal energies, yin and yang, like these traditional Eastern, you could say they're more driven, young oriented, living in a more orientation towards their ambition or doing and getting things done in the world. And then at a certain point, and perhaps motherhood is initiating them into something more yin like, a return to their inner feminine, to a deeper part of their being where their sensuality or erotic life also exists. So I find that to be so beautiful, to be able to be this support on the path of saying, hey, like, you didn't have the time and space. Maybe it would have been looked at as a luxury or a privilege to have an erotic life or a sensual life as a woman. But now you're seeing that it doesn't have to be a privilege or a luxury, that it's actually a necessity to you, right? And it's a healing. It heals this distortion that we have all been indoctrinated into, that we're just like these good little worker bees who've got to keep doing and going and burning ourselves ragged. And so I love working with women who essentially are in that place. Like it's kind of a feminine reclamation or a feminine discovery, but that really involves the body. It involves like how am I relating to my body, to my
Mm,
emotions, and to my
hmm.
sensations? And there's so much healing there usually that needs to be kind of faced and come into contact with too. So
Right.
there's like the exciting part of the journey of like, oh my God, I'm discovering. And then there's the pain of, wow, I've been out of touch with my heart, my emotions, my womb, my hips, my thighs, my joy, my pleasure. And so it's kind of all there in the mix.
So there's two things that came up. You said, that we have kind of this societal that we're the doers, we have to keep on going and all this. But I also, when you were saying that, was also thinking that there's also this kind of shaming of women who are like pleasureful or
Yeah.
sensual, right? It's like, oh my gosh, she's whatever. So it's kind of this like, well, do I dare be that,
Right.
beautiful, sensual, sexual woman if, I'm going to be viewed by society as, like
Yeah. Like
it's almost a negative
frivolous
thing, right?
or lustful.
Exactly. Exactly. As opposed to, I think our male counterparts, that's fine. If they're outgoing and sexy and handsome, it's like, oh wow, look at him. But
Right. Right.
women are shamed
Right.
for that. So how do we make peace with that, right? Because we're wanting to maybe be more in tune with our sensuality, in tune with our emotions and all this, and yet where, society tends to put us down for that.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot in Fuck Like a Goddess because there is this kind of template that a lot of us received, like the virgin and the whore. If you grew up in kind of Christianity, of like, there's this, don't be that, right? You've got to be the good girl. You've got to be virginal. And then when you add mother to it, then mother especially shouldn't be a woman who is enjoying her life. Like she's got to be dutiful and she's got to be sacrificing. So then you have all these shadow templates of women, of martyr, victim, overgiving, right? Like these aspects of mothering that maybe some people listening have experienced through your family line that are really in the shadow. They're not healthy, right? So if a woman has given up her pleasure, her joy, because she has this story that she's inherited that she has to give it up in order to be a good mom, she's got to give everything to her kids, then she's passing on this really distorted embodiment of mother. Right.
Mm,
And mother is only self sacrifice, overgiving, martyr. And then what happens is that becomes a resentful mother. And whether she's outwardly resentful or it's simply in her unconscious, it's going to be there, especially if she has denied her sexuality for some reason, or her sensuality, or her artistry, or her creativity. It will come out in some way, whether it's disease, illness, some sort of mental or physical, something will happen. And eventually her children will be impacted. And that's the sad
mm,
thing, is that
right.
I think women can think, oh, I'm sacrificing myself for my kids, and that's a good thing. Well, some of that is a good thing. Yes, you maybe aren't going to go out and party till 4 a.m. and do MDMA right now. Like maybe you did that when you were, a few years back or whatever. You can do it later, okay? But maybe not right now. So there are some sacrifices that are really important to create health, I think, in your home. But when you take that to an extreme, it's really just a shadow looking to be manifest. And it's like the shadow is sort of then using you. It's like, ooh, a woman doesn't know, but she's like, I get to martyr myself. And there's kind of like a little bit of it's like a shadow turn on there of like, I'm the victim again, right? And I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about when we see people in that, right? Like, oh, I'm just so bummed that like I can't do anything for myself these days because of my kids. God, they take up so much time. So all of that is really dysfunctional. It's really unhealthy to be a woman who's performing any of those shadow frequencies, especially around your child. The same can be said for a relationship, right? When we have these same similar shadows that come through control with men or with partners in general, control over giving, the martyring, the self-sacrificing, the resentments, all of that. So I think that it's interesting to consider as women and mothers, what's the cost of us not having emotions, not having sensuality, right?
Well, and from your description, it just sounds like abandonment of ourselves into motherhood, right? It's
You're
like,
right.
it's true that motherhood, takes a lot from us. And I think at the beginning, like those first few weeks, yes, we are in a bubble. We are in a symbiosis, relationship. And
Right.
it's so, so important for both to have that. But once that we come out of that, it's how do we, regain our individuality and all of that. So yeah,
Yeah.
so important.
And for me, I would say all three, because for me and my journey, it's the three of us.
Right, right.
And my partner is just like there every step of the way. And we're there together, the three of us, which for me is a great healing because my parents divorced when I was 5. I'm not sure what those first few years were like because I wasn't there, but because of some of the patterns I experienced later, that there were some, shadows in the space. And for me to have a relationship that heals backwards in time in a way, to have a father that's super present to all of it. Like he's right now holding our babies so that I can be here on this podcast, and we alternate putting her to sleep and her naps. And I was just talking to a friend. She's like, "Oh, he's going to put her down for her nap so you and I can walk and get a coffee." And I'm like, "Yeah." And that in itself is a healing, right? Like there's no complaining. I cannot complain about him. I cannot complain that I'm giving more and he's giving less. Like we just give differently.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I think, and this is where it's like the art of conscious parenting. It's like, okay, we're adding consciousness in and awareness into our parenting and into all of our moments as much as possible. And then of course we go unconscious sometimes and we act out patterns and habits and things that we don't like,
Right.
but we're trying
Right.
so hard to stay conscious.
So let me ask you, Alexandra, if you were to some new mothers are listening to us and they're like, what are they talking about? Like what would be the first steps of awareness of like what kind of the mechanism that you take women through that come to you for your support?
Well, read Fuck Like a Goddess because it breaks a lot of things down in a really
Okay.
easy way, I think. And it's only $20, so it's way cheaper than working with me one-on-one. But this podcast is free, so let me give you some more here. So being aware of yourself, what you bring into the relational dyad. If it's a dyad, maybe it's a triad. It's up to you, of course, how you do relationship. But what you bring into relationship with your child, with your partner, being aware of what you bring. And you can look at this. You can look at your mental body, your physical body, your emotional body. So I could do an assessment with you and I could go, okay, like I can see on you some things that you bring, right? Like maybe your posture is hunched over and you're kind of like looking a little scared and your breath is a little shallow. So I do a lot of embodied work with people. And
Okay.
so
Okay.
I can work with a woman and I can see on her physical body her mental struggles or her emotional struggles very easily. How you work that on your own is becoming aware of yourself. Like, what am I bringing in? And so, yeah, you could look at your body, but you can also just look at your inner state and your mental state. And you can look at what are the thoughts that are in my
Hmm.
head all day. Is it self-loving thoughts? Is it self-hating? Is it controlling? What is it? Not to make anything bad, okay? So it's not making bad anything about you. We are just people that are unwinding habits and patterns that have been passed down from us and even put into us by a pretty unwell society on a whole, unfortunately. And so it's up to us to be aware. We can't blame anybody. Okay. Like, I've blamed the government, I've blamed my parents. But at this point, I have to take self responsibility for
Right.
me in this moment. So,
Right.
what am I bringing into the moments with my child or my partner? Like, am I blaming them? Am I shaming them? So, self awareness is always the first step. And it's like the moment that we say, okay, what can I be responsible about instead of complaining about something? And then we start to enter into how we can transform. But self responsibility and self awareness is the first piece. Then transformation is possible. It starts by feeling the feelings associated with whatever's present. So if I get aware and I'm like, wow, I'm really blaming my partner for not doing what I want him to do as a dad, and that's his fault that I'm not having time as a woman to, let's say, be a writer, because well, I have to do the cooking and the cleaning and I'm nursing all the time, and I'm really mad at him. It's his fault. And so then if I really take responsibility for that voice of blame and that self victimhood, then I can feel that, wow, what's underneath that blame and victimhood? I would say fear, anger, rage, and I would have to feel those feelings.
Mhm.
And I'd have to find a way to sit, which is a luxury as a mother, to sit and feel my fear that I'm losing myself as a woman, my rage that I feel like I do more things around the house and I maybe haven't asked for my partner to do the other things because I'm over functioning. And maybe my grief at that my life has changed. So I'd have to be with those feelings instead of being in blame or victimhood. And then my next step after feeling would be asking for what I need. Okay, I need to make some changes, but not from blame or victimhood. Now that I've felt my pain, my fear, my rage, now I can ask for what I need. Hey, babe, I need 3 nights a week where I don't cook dinner. Like, do you want to cook or should we order out? Right? So this is part of how we make change and we transform things in our body. It starts with self-responsibility. I break this down in Fuck Like a Goddess. Then we have to feel what's really there, what the emotions are. Sometimes those emotions go back to our childhood. They're very old.
Right.
And sometimes that takes years of really noticing, right? Like, oh, this grief is so old. This rage is so old. This fear is so old. If I speak up in my relationship, am I going to get abandoned? So I'd rather stay in victimhood or blame, because if I speak up, what if I'm abandoned? And that happened to me as a child, and that was really awful. So it's like a deep unwinding. And I do a lot of work in depth psychology and internal family systems. I weave that into my work and my coaching with women and embodiment. And so it's like there's a beautiful liberation that comes when we are able to come into awareness, to feel, and then to make choices from an empowered place. That's like, oh, we're going to order dinner 3 nights a week so that I can write, or I'm going to ask you. Instead of moping around the house and being grumpy about cleaning, I'm going to ask you, or we're going to sit in a family meeting and I'm going to say, hey, I need a house cleaner. What do we need to do to hire a house cleaner? Oh, well, I need to work 3 more hours, or I need to do this. Okay, great. Let's do that. Right. So, these are kind of trivial examples and they might be more complicated, but
Yeah, they're trivial, but so important
universal,
in our,
right?
yeah, and so important in our day to day. Like, I remember, when you brought up the house cleaner, I remember very well that decision with my husband, because we had 2 young children and we were both cleaning the house on the weekend, and it was like, okay, this isn't this isn't working out. Like, this is not the way we want to be spending our time. But,
Right.
it's that self-awareness. And I really like what you say about, you have this self-awareness. So really being able to ask yourself these questions. And sometimes they can be kind of scary questions, right? We don't
Yes.
always, I know for myself, sometimes, looking deeper is like, oh, what am I going to find? Right.
Right.
So it's,
Yeah,
it's
who has
always
time for that, especially as a mom, you know?
that, and you don't, maybe you're afraid to uncover things. I don't know. But it's just, I love that it's so gentle. It seems so gentle, right? It's about being self-aware, and then, like, what am I bringing and what can I do about it? Like,
Yeah,
I'm in control. And that to me is so powerful, because it's
that's it.
true that we're so easy to blame it on the kids, blame it on our partners, blame it on society. But in reality, we are 100% in control of the choices that we make. So,
Exactly, exactly. And the
and yeah,
same goes for our sex lives with our partners. We're working against greater factors. We're working against being tired. We're working against being overworked, whatever, right? We're working against, I don't know, maybe some body stuff if a woman is going through that postpartum. But it's the same thing. We have to make choices. It's not going to happen itself. The house is not going to get cleaned itself. Your creative life is not going to happen on its own. And your sex life is not going to happen on its own. So if it did at the beginning of the relationship, great. That's hormones, that's chemistry, that's most people, right? Beginning of a relationship, sex life runs itself. It's a self-running kind of a machine, right? It's like, cool, our hormones are just bringing us in. Then we've all heard that the honeymoon phase shifts things, hormones shift, you enter into something that is a little bit more like Esther Perel writes in her book about mating in captivity. Then you are entering into more of a domestic bonded place, which has less excitement, less thrill, danger, variety, etc. So when that happens, you got to start making choices around sex and sexuality. It's not going to happen on its own anymore. Just like you going to the gym. When we're younger, we have to work out. The body looks good. We don't need to stretch. But at a certain point, we have to commit to stretching or exercising. It's not going to happen for us. It's not going to happen naturally. So I think a lot of people kick and scream about this, and they're like, but wait, I have to actually make an effort. I need to plan sex. I need to initiate sex. I have to like make space for sex. And it's like, yes, you do. And so, whatever vision Hollywood sold you that sex was just going to be this self functioning thing, especially as you get older and bodies change, and especially as you have kids and time changes and space changes and all of that, whoever sold you the idea that if sex isn't kind of happening on its own, then it's broken, that was a lie. So, you can cry about it if you want, feel free, cry, have a tantrum, and then turn to your imperfect self and your imperfect partner. And even if you've been together for so long that they feel like family and you don't necessarily feel super horny and wild for them, like you're sitting with Brad Pitt circa 1995 or Jason Momoa or whoever your, kind of emblem is, and then find a way to have fun and to dive into it, because the energy of the sex, if you guys have been together for a while, that's not going to be the energy that gets you into bed. Once you're in the room, in the bed, and things are moving, then the sexual energy will keep things going. But to get there, it's got to be choice, self-responsibility, love, devotion, a reminder of, hey, when we do this, we feel more connected afterwards.
right,
But the
right.
sort of youthful horniness is probably not going to be the thing that gets you in the bedroom. I mean, if it does, awesome. But I would say for most people, that's not, when we're not teenagers and we're not being driven by a libido, then what gets us into those sexual moments with our partner has to be something else. It has to be our desire to feel the bond, the connection, to like re-up that, to have fun together. And that's going to be, again, a place of choice.
Right, right. And what I'm also hearing is that I think for a long time we have, as women, and maybe I'm dating myself, but it seems like it's the our partner's responsibility to
Oh, yeah,
initiate
that's
anything.
so big,
And
Jean Marie.
And what I'm hearing from you is like, no, we get to
Oh, yeah.
initiate things,
That's another
right?
lie we were sold
Yeah, yeah.
by the patriarchy or by Hollywood or whoever you want to blame, is that, well, my partner's going to keep, especially if it's a masculine, feminine, male, female dynamic. My man's going to initiate. My husband's going to initiate. No, they are
No,
human too. They
right,
also have a libido that changes over time. They also are busy and neurotic and anxious and overworked and all of the things. And this idea that if he's not pursuing you and coming to you and like ravishing you with his, hard member, then there's something wrong with him or you or the relationship. That's another lie. And it's so painful, this reckoning. It's like, no, we both are responsible for our sex life. And I'm responsible for my erotic life outside of having sex with my partner, whether that means actual masturbation or self-pleasure, or whether that's me dancing naked in the mirror or in the shower, or putting oil on my body, or wearing a sexy dress or outfit, or lighting the candles at dinner and dancing around. Whatever your sensual life looks like for you as a woman, you are responsible for that too. So you're responsible for keeping that alive. So you don't arrive to the bedroom just like, oh, oops, I haven't even considered that I am a juicy, sensual, embodied being. And now I'm coming to you kind of dry and crunchy and heady. It's like, well, that's not really going to be fun, right? And that's again on both sides for a man as well. If he's not feeling in contact with his body or his breath or his sexuality at all, and you're having to be the one that takes him from 0 to 100, that's like a heavy lift. So we
right.
want to arrive in the bedroom like at least at like 50, right? Like, so we're like at least available, soft, open, juicy. We may be tired, we may be emotional, but we're there open. Not I'm coming here dry, closed. I'm like a no to this moment, but I'm here anyway. That's not setting, that's not kind to your partner, and that's not kind to yourself either, because you're kind of setting up a hard moment for the relationship.
Right,
So
right.
what I say to women is like, it doesn't have to be complicated. Like, you shower every day. So touch your skin, enjoy yourself, put on music, right? You cook in the kitchen every day. Are you cooking like a robot who's busy? Or could you put on music and dance while you're cooking, right? What brings joy into your body and giving yourself that space? For me, it's singing and dancing and clothes and color and food. And so am I doing those things like a heady, neurotic, anxious robot on my phone? Or am I doing those things like with like a joy and gratitude for being alive? There's
Yes.
this scene in this really old movie from like, I don't know, probably the 90s with Salma Hayek and Matthew Perry. I think it's called Fools Rush In, if I'm correct. And Salma Hayek plays this like Latin archetype of this. I think she's a Mexican woman, and he's this like kind of like, buttoned up white guy. And he meets her and she's so spicy, and it's, obviously very stereotyped. But she's like dancing in the kitchen, cooking, and her hair is flowing, and she's wearing this kind of swirly dress. And it's really this archetypal moment of like a woman enjoying herself and her life and her pleasure. And he walks in and he's just like looking at her with such adoration, just like, what the fuck? Pardon my not French, but so it's finding, what is that for you? When are you so in your joy and pleasure that your partner looks at you and they're like, whoa, this is just such a delight to experience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's true. I mean, it's taking pleasure of all the simple things and
Mm-hmm.
admiring yourself, I think. When you mention that self-love, I think it is so important to just acknowledge like,
Yeah,
wow,
look in the
hi
mirror
there, I
naked and
love
be like, I'm
you.
fucking
Yeah,
hot.
exactly.
I love my
Exactly.
curves. I love my
Yeah.
booty, right? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to look any kind of a way in order for
Yeah.
it to feel alive and sensual and
Yeah.
delicious.
Yeah. One thing that I don't know if you know this, but I'm host here, but I'm also a birth and postpartum doula. So I work with new families, new parents. And one of the things that I really, emphasize on is to make time to be together, to be away from your children and all that. And I know it's kind of, hard at the beginning, but that to me is a priority, like
Yeah.
to nurture your initial relationship. Um, what do you have to say about that? Like, is that something that you also recommend to new parents, and how can they go about it? Sorry, my alarm is going off.
So I would say it all depends how you're parenting as to how much time you get alone. So if you're new parents and you guys have elders around, grandparents, family members that are supporting, doing any childcare support, and you have access to alone time, yes, take that alone time. Obviously, you probably have to work, or one of you has to work. So set aside a certain amount of time. I did not have access to that. So my partner and I don't have family members or parents that are supporting in the childcare space. So for us, it was nap times, and it is nap times. We're like, okay, on the weekends, nap times are sacred. Like, we have sex at 9 a.m. The other night we had sex at 10 p.m. and I was like, this is so cool. We're having sex in the dark. We only have sex at a very short window in the mornings. And I was like, oh, and I tell you, it's because most of the time we're too tired at 10 p.m. But we had gone out to a party and had a little tequila. And I was like, it's 10 p.m. and I'm ready. And so that was a rarity, right? But for us, nap times are the times that we hold sacred as a couple during the weekends. During the week, nap times, we often are working and we have different responsibilities. But on the weekends, during that time, we look at it as like our sacred time as a couple. And so we can but we're not leaving the house. So we create whatever we want to create during that time at home, whether it's a cacao ceremony or a massage or a bath together or having actual
Or
sex.
taking a nap.
I know we're not nappers, which I know is you're supposed to become a napper when you're a new mom, but we're both too crazy for that. We both have we're just very energetic people, which is great. But anyway,
Yeah.
yes, if you can nap. We have not napped once since okay, last night I fell asleep while I was putting her to sleep, which was really sweet and that's very rare too. So then I went to sleep, but find the time, whether it's nap
Yeah.
times, whether you do end up having a babysitter, mother's helper, a family member, find the time, put it in the calendar, make it happen.
Yes.
I think that is essential. I've heard that it's going to be essential forever and ever. Amen. We are very devoted to our relationship being healthy, and not only healthy, but like inspiring. And so because, my partner and I both work in the space of coaching around intimacy and relationship, it's just in the language of our bond to prioritize our health and our connection. It doesn't mean that we are amazing at it all the time and things don't fall to the wayside, but we know what it feels like when we're connected and we're not. And for instance, we just did a big travel, and because we were so external, seeing so many people, connecting with people, I felt our bond felt a little dry and frayed, and we felt less close and more distant, and I felt really sad about it. And my abandonment wound came up and blah, blah, blah. And when we got back, I was like, we need to prioritize our bond. And my partner's like, we're good, because he leans more on the avoidance spectrum and I'm more on the anxious spectrum. And so I'm like, no, we need time to bond. And what that looked like was just having a few dedicated moments for our bond in the calendar. And for me, I know that that's part of what I need in the dynamic and in the relationship in order to feel connected. So that's a question I would ask for anyone listening. What do you need in order to feel connected to your partner? It might be sex once a week. It might be sex every 2 weeks. It might be cuddling. It might be eating a meal together once a day. But you guys can define that for your relationship and then stick to it. Just know that what's going to create relational health for you is a particular thing that you'll need to know. And then when that slips to the wayside, because it likely will at some point, then you know how to get back on track. You're like, okay, we just need to have dinner. We need to have sex. We need to have a good cry, whatever it ends up being.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for all this. It's been essential, I think, important conversation. I know some people might be kind of ill at ease with these conversations because there are not like always things that people are super comfortable with. And
Yeah.
I just love how comfortable you are, talking about it and make it so
And if you're not
beautiful and joy.
comfortable, then there may be just some pieces that need a little healing and
Exactly.
tender love, and that's okay. And it's like if it's triggering to go into those places, but you want to, then just know, okay, I have a little feeling and healing to do there.
Right, right. Beautiful. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And to wrap us up, I know you're, like you said, you're a brand new mother, just 1 year into it. But I always like to ask the parents on my show if they were to go back. So, let's say 13, 14 months when you were expecting your little one, what wise words would you tell yourself knowing all that you know today?
It's such a good question. I had coffee with my postpartum doula this morning, and I told her this, what I'm about to tell you.
Okay.
I would have saved enough money to not work for a year after.
Yes. Love
And
that.
unfortunately, I did not do that financial planning. So we both, we took time off, and then we both had to kind of get back to work. But we work from home, so that's very amazing. But I would have taken a year off. Take a year off, stay in the bubble if you can. If you can somehow swing it financially, I think it's worth it. Or 6
Wonderful.
months even, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Any parting words that you would like to leave our listeners, our viewers with today, Alexandra?
Go buy my books if you're interested in these topics, and if anything I said, really struck your heart today. You're doing a good job just by paying attention, having this conversation and listening. Just pat yourself on the back. You're doing a good job. And yeah, I'm just sending everyone out there love. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you, Jean-Marie, for having me here today.